This is Michael Cioni, and you're watching the Cinematography Podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben Rock. You're looking really good today.
Yeah, I have this Kaluji setup. It should be mystifying to people that it looks so much better, but rest assured that there's 1,000 wires running in and out of everything to get this feed on a podcast. But now, in all my Zoom calls, I'll be the one who looks like he's in an Errol Morris documentary.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that it's finally happened. Now we're on parity. Now it's not just me with a modern camera and you with a web camera. Now we both have modern cameras, which is great. Yeah. So Ben, who is on the show today?
Well, I cannot be more excited about who's on the show today because it is one of the most inspirational people I personally know, Michael Cioni of Strada, formerly of Plaster City, formerly of Light Iron, formerly of Frame.io, and
formerly of Panavision. Yeah.
Yeah, and his new thing, which I have talked about on the show repeatedly, is Strada. Just right after we did the interview, the next day, and he talks about this in the interview, they dropped a demo on their YouTube channel that I think everyone should watch that was seeing if they could use the Apple Vision Pro headset for the focus puller.
Yeah, that's fun. I haven't watched it yet. I'm looking forward to it.
It's fascinating because, spoiler alert, the Apple Vision Pro actually made her job way easier. It really did a great job for her. The only real complaint that seemed to come through was that it's heavy on your head.
Yeah.
Which, the Apple Vision Pro version 2 will probably weigh a third as much, and they'll keep figuring out how to pare it down. But I encourage everyone to watch it because Cioni, as you will doubtlessly get in our interview, is someone who loves to take technology and push it into interesting workflows and interesting applications in the film business. And that's what he's made his whole career of doing. You introduced me to Michael literally 21 years ago. My relationship with Michael Cioni is old enough to drink, and and it was at when he was at Plaster City. He had long hair.
Yeah,
I think he was out of college.
It was a different time then. Yeah,
yeah.
For sure.
We talk about that a little bit, but he is just one of the smartest people in the business, in my opinion. And usually, when we always talk about this, we talk about art, craft, and philosophy on this podcast. We don't really talk about tech, but talking to Cioni is talking about what is exciting and what is art, craft, and philosophy about tech.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think it makes perfect sense to bring tech into that because Michael's made a career out of integrating tech into different workflows, into different methodologies. And so it makes perfect sense.
I'll let his interview tell the whole story. But obviously, I would encourage anyone to go check out Strada on YouTube and watch his videos. Like, you could start at the beginning and watch them even figure out what Strada was going to be. They didn't even know when they started.
Yeah, it's a good story and pretty compelling. So I remember those early days of his new company. It's really interesting and it's great to watch the progression. It's exciting. I'm going to get to see him next week at NAB too, which will be fun.
Which brings us into our close focus.
And now, close focus.
Yes, our close focus. So next week is the National Association of Broadcasters Convention. And I think that there's a lot of people, certainly maybe who've never been to NAB, who don't understand its relationship to the cinema sort of aspect of the industry, of tech for cinema. But NAB has always been the largest worldwide convention for technology, for any sort of media production. And this includes IBC, which is another really, really big one in Europe. It's sort of like the European version of NAB. But NAB brings in a lot of different aspects, and it might include satellite transmission, it might include television production, it might include cinema production, but they kind of all bring it under one roof. And they have a series of seminars and workshops, and of course a very, very large trade show. And they now kind of group almost every manufacturer of the same type into the same sort of area. I've spoken at NAB a couple of times, and it is I want to say kind of like a necessary evil for the industry. Actually, it's probably not necessary necessary at all. But I have been very outspoken about my mixed feelings about the convention. It is very much, it's a B2B. It's for professionals. It's not for consumers out there. It's not for just anyone who wants to go, wander around.
But in a sense it is. Like if you are a filmmaker, if you're a starting out filmmaker, you could go to NAB, you could get a free exhibits only pass. You could go look at all the new stuff that's about to come out. And, the first time I ever went there was in 2003, I believe, with you.
Yeah.
And, at the time, I think you were working at Moviola and we were just kind of looking around at all the stuff. But like what I love about it is like one year I was with you and we turned a corner and saw the Phantom camera. And like that was new. It hadn't been released yet. And it was like the military company that had developed the Phantom camera had a really tiny table. It wasn't really that impressive, the display, but like what they were showing was like, holy crap, digital slow motion, digital like crazy high frame rate slow motion hadn't existed before then. And you'll find that stuff. To me, that's the beauty of NAB is turning a corner and seeing like a hidden gem that you wouldn't have found otherwise and being like, oh, what's this new thing? I have never even heard of this.
It's funny that that Vision Research high-speed Phantom camera, the very first one that they made that shot HD. I was actually working for Dalsa at that time, and we bought it. We bought it like right then and there. We bought it.
Oh,
and
you
we
did?
put it into rentals. We were the first rental house in the country to start renting that high-speed camera, which did 1,000 frames in HD, which is kind of crazy. Anyway, moving on. The thing to talk about NAB, which I think is noteworthy, is all of the unexpected stuff that comes from it. And I think the unexpected stuff is similar to like the effect that you get if you go to a film festival where you just start meeting people and talking to people and then make really, really good connections. And part of the best thing really about NAB, despite it being large and, unwieldy and having all kinds of different people and things going on there, it's excellent networking. It's really, really good networking, especially if you do some sort of work on the technical side or have some sort of connection to the local, Las Vegas production communities, or you work very closely with one of the major manufacturers. And because it's such a great place for networking, our podcast and Hot Rod Cameras are going to co-sponsor a meetup on Sunday. So this Sunday from 4:30 to 7:30 at the Fireside Lounge, you can come down there. See me. I will be there at the Fireside Lounge.
I will not.
Well, you will not, but I will be there. So, or look for someone who looks like me hanging out near the bar. And if our sponsorship money has not run out, I will buy you a drink. I will buy you an appetizer. I will buy you whatever until that money is gone. So it starts at 4:30. The show's still going on at 4:30, but let me tell you, by around 4 o'clock, most people who have been there all day are really kind of feeling it, especially if they didn't go and get lunch outside of whatever the pretzels are at the convention or something like that.
The food there is not the best.
Not the best. And usually you're kind of ready for a drink. You're kind of like your brain's full. You're done with kind of walking around. So 4:30 to 6 o'clock is happy hour over at the Fireside Lounge. We're going to hang out there, a bit after. As a matter of fact, I'll just keep hanging out basically until the money's spent. But we've got some wonderful sponsors. In addition to Hot Rod and the Cinematography podcast sponsoring this event, Cartoni has stepped up. Cartoni is going to be thrown.
I've had a Cartoni tripod now for like 15 years. When you recommended it, and it's the best investment I ever made. Holy crap.
They make incredible tripods. Revar Cine, who makes all kinds of really cool, different sort of related optical camera sort of parts and filters. And they're the people behind PA Tiers. I don't know if you ever saw the PA Tiers filter, but it was the marketing for it is it's a diffusion filter forged from the tears of very sad and depressed production assistants, which is it's a real thing. It's a real product. You can order PA Tiers. They have another filter called Scarf Dust, which is crafted from the dust they've collected from very pompous DP's scarves. They're a fun group. So Revar Cine.
Don't tell any of our guests that.
Yeah. It's
none of our guests have been pompous. We have the least pompous guests in all of cinematography.
It's really true. So yeah, all the other ones that are out there who have not been our show, those are the pompous ones.
All those. You know who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
You're listening right now. You're listening or even watching us on YouTube.
And it also sounds like, and it's not confirmed, but I think it'll be confirmed today, Module 8, who makes this really kind of cool, crazy thing called a tuner, which allows you to take modern looking lenses and create more vintage qualities to them. Module 8 says they will most likely be sponsoring. So we got to thank these companies. These companies are going to come out and basically buy people food and drinks. And it's a great networking and socializing opportunity. So Fireside Lounge, we'll put a note for it on all of our social medias. But yes,
man, I wish I could be there.
Yeah, I'm sorry you're going to miss it, Ben. They'll have to put up with me, but it'll probably be another like 40 or 50 other people who I think are going to turn up. So it'll be good.
I gotta make sure to go next year.
So don't forget, this Sunday at the Fireside Lounge.
Sunday.
In Las Vegas, right on the Strip. And it's got parking, which is incredible. It's connected to the Peppermill. If you want to come, make sure that you RSVP. You must RSVP if you want us to buy you a drink, if you want us to buy you something. So to RSVP, you can go to the show notes, you can go to our social medias. There'll be links I'm sure on our Instagram, a link in bio type of thing. It'll take you to the RSVP, show up, find me, I'll check you off, and then you're good to go. So this Sunday, April 14th, 4:30, 7:30 p.m. That's the range.
And you guys can talk smack about me because I won't be there.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll dish on Ben.
It's fair. I have it coming, whatever it is.
So yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into our interview with Michael Cioni.
Let's do it.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
We were just talking about that. Ilya introduced me to you when you were at Plaster City, and it was in 2003, and I had just shot a short film on the Panasonic SDX 900, and nobody in town but you knew anything about the workflow of DVC Pro 50 at the time, which was, I'll say, the gold standard of standard definition.
That's funny. That's a great way to say it.
But it was seriously at the time like the best camera that I'd ever seen. And you guys at Plaster City put together like a 35 millimeter output of stuff that had been shot on that camera, and you used a little bit of our footage. And we had shot with the PS Technique Pro adapter, which when I saw it, I think you did it at Technicolor. It rendered everything just a little bit out of focus, a little bit soft, as one might expect.
Yep. It was good times though.
Yeah. Even back then, the first time I met you in Plaster City, you weren't even in the mothership Plaster City office. At that time, you were just in an office at the Taft Building on Hollywood Boulevard. I was blown away by your understanding and knowledge of workflows. And I kind of want to even start by saying, like, where does this professor level understanding and interest in workflows come from for you? Because it's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people in the creative field just don't even think about. I shoot it on my thing, I stick it in the computer, I edit. What's the workflow? But you're like the master, you're like the samurai of workflows. Where did that start for you?
The beginning of all this came from what I actually thought was the actual playbook of how you're supposed to become a Hollywood success. And how I captured all that was watching TV shows like Movie Magic and then watching DVD extras where the directors would do the commentary. And what I started to pick up is that my favorite directors' commentaries really knew about what and how the film was made, not just how the performances were directed. And I started going, kind of leaning towards that. I think that was the difference between a good commentary and a bad commentary, right? And the ones that were really exceptional at that sort of inspired me to realize that's the way to become a master of the craft. It's to widen the base of knowledge. I came from the broadcast industry. I got my first job at 18 at PBS, at a PBS station, and I've been a workaholic since. And when I was working there, one of the things I learned in live broadcast was that the person who was directing the live broadcast had to have spent time in every single station in that control room before they can become a director. And the reason essentially is if someone has a catastrophic issue and you're live, the director has knowledge of some of the other positions. So in a horrible situation, they could become a TD, and start the switcher. They could do audio. They could do, Chiron, all this stuff. And I realized that the discipline of working your way up and having experience in a master control room like that was really smart because it allowed you to gain tangible access to all the devices so that you could get out of a jam. Well, as we all know, in the cinema world, you don't have to do any other jobs before you become a director. You're just allowed to just skip the line. And I always thought that was kind of silly because what I would do when I started my first business, Plaster City, is I would talk to these people and sometimes they'd say, well, you do it all, Michael. You know all this stuff. And I'd be like, Are you nuts? You're going to let me make decisions for you? This is your money. This is your baby. And you want me to raise it for you? I thought that was really strange. And the clients that I think I was most successful with and got along with the most are the ones that wanted to know what I was doing with it, to inform themselves so that they were less susceptible to a dead end or a bad decision because they were informed and they understood that. It's sort of like if you're going to do remodeling on your house, you don't ever want to give all the trust to the contractor. You want to go over the plans with the architect. You want to go over the plans with the plumber and the electrician and the designer. And if you just left for a couple of months and came back, you just trusted them implicitly, I feel like you'd probably have made some different decisions had you known along the way. I don't think a film should be any different. So I really wanted to embody knowledge to help workflows so that I could inform customers and partners and filmmakers, and then together we would figure out what's the best recipe for this particular film.
Yeah, yeah. And when we met you, you were at Plaster City, and like I said, you were in the Taft building, but then quickly you moved into a theater. You had your colorist Ian Vortevek, who somebody name-checked him on the show recently as their colorist. And I was like, I know Ian. You know, like you assembled a great team, and then I heard you were, Plaster City went away and you founded Light Iron, which did, even bigger stuff. And correct me if I'm wrong, were they not acquired by Panavision?
Yeah, we started Light Iron in 2009. I did not own Plaster City. I had a owner and partners. And right around when the economy back then was really poor, I actually, even though it looked really bad for filmmaking and the market in general, the digital cinema revolution was about to hit fever pitch. And we were really starting to experience massive change, massive adoption from analog to digital or from tape to files. And so in order for us to best position ourselves to capitalize on that predictable shift, we wanted to own the business. So I loved Plaster City. I loved the people that were working with me and the people that supported me financially to build it. Yeah. But I was not an owner, even though I helped start the post side. So starting Light Iron was simply a way to continue the mission and vision of helping all cinema and television people build the best digital content through better workflows. But I wanted to own it as well. So we started Light Iron in 2009 and then sold it to Panavision in 2015.
Amazing. You had it for 6 years and then you brought it to Panavision. You still ran it when you went to Panavision. And like the thing that I remember, even back to the Plaster City days, kind of going back to kind of the workflow stuff, is one of the things Ilya had explained to me as to why I needed to meet with you was that one of the services you guys were doing was like bring you the tapes, bring you a hard drive. And it's funny to think that this isn't something that was just commonly done. You'd put the footage on the hard drive, we go edit, we bring it back to you, your company can handle the finishing, the color grading, all the output stuff, if that was all necessary. And then Light Iron took that up to the next level, especially because, as you said, we were moving to purely file-based and less tape was being used, it was being employed. So how much of a shift was that? I mean, again, I guess from watching your videos and having known you for some time, that like your brain is constantly firing, and when like a new technology comes up, you're figuring out how to sneak it into the workflow where it could possibly fit. But like, as we're going through that transition, which to me is seismic really for the industry, we're going from recording onto a physical media to recording onto a card. How far out did you see that revolution coming? And what did you do to prepare for it to make Light Iron sort of the industry leader in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I look at any change, whether it's in fashion or music or in media and entertainment, everything, no matter what it is, basically starts as a fad. Right? And there are fads in fashion and music and food and, user habits and even social media. And of course, in the way that technology is able to be leveraged to make content. And so only some of those fads graduate out of the fad based on adoption and become a trend, right? Now it's trendy to use this camera or that camera or go to that restaurant or listen to this band, right? And then only the fewest trends become standards. And so what you're really trying to do is identify the fads that have the most likely potential to move into the trendy space, and then those trends that move into the standard space. Nothing becomes a standard overnight. In fact, I actually used to argue with a lot of people, shocker, and I used to say this idea of the phrase industry standard, what people have to remember is the industry standard is actually not a committee. There's lots of committees in Hollywood that make a lot of rules, but an industry standard is not one of them. This is the one that the users have control over. We decide without any voting, without any meetings, we just decide sort of silently, collectively with the tools that we use, what is the industry standard. There's no signs, there's no billboards, there's no voting days, right? It's just, we just know it. You just know what an industry standard is. But when they are backwards, if you go backwards, when are they trends and when are they fads? It's really hard to determine that. It gets very foggy, right? So what you have to do is sort of trace a early fad, and you kind of got to see where you think it can go. Does it have the potential to get to the trend phase? And if yes, follow that, use that, adopt it, learn it, invest in it. And then if it has the potential to move into the standard space, do that. Now, the better you get at this, or the more certain you are at one of them, the more you jump into them, the deeper you go. So some fads I might just put on the shelf in a maybe zone. Some I keep a close eye on, but others I start treating it like a standard well in advance, so that if it hits the tipping point and becomes a standard, you're the only game in town. You're the phone number or the reputation that people already have for it. And that has always been my technique for the last 24 years, essentially trying to identify that pattern of fad, trend, standard conversion, and try to be at all those key elements, those key moments when they convert to the next level.
That's really interesting. Can you think of any of the fads that maybe the conventional wisdom said, here's where it's going to go, and then it didn't go that way?
Oh, sure. One that's really obvious that everyone remembered 10 years ago is 3D, right? Yeah. 3D is like Halley's Comet. It comes around, everybody pays attention, and then it's gone for like 20 years. It comes back around, everybody gets excited again, right? So, but like Halley's Comet, this allegory holds up. The binoculars and the ways to see it improve. So it absolutely gets better and clearer every time it comes back around. And 3D is no different, right? So it was like the last time in 2010, 11, 12, 13, it's like, this is it. 3D wasn't invented in 2013. It's over 100 years old. But it was like, oh, is this the time it's going to stick? Is it going to move from trend to standard, right? And it wanted to, it almost did, but as we all know, it didn't. And it was pulled back. And then we went back to a 2D primary viewing experience. But 10 years ago, there were a lot of people that might have bet that 3D was going to be a permanent standard experience, but it only became, it went back to its traditional specialized once in a while experience. So that's a great example.
When James Cameron makes his next movie, we'll all get excited about it, and then some people will try and copy it, and it won't it won't take. Yeah, I agree. I remember being at NAB with Ilya the year that everything at NAB was all 3D home television sets, and I'm like, are people really going to be sitting at home watching with the 3D glasses on their faces?
Right. And of course, we didn't know. Nobody knows for sure. But this is why it certainly got out of fad mode and it moved to trend, because it was very trendy. And that's what I'm talking about. Now, I didn't think it was going to become a standard. I really didn't think. And so here's what I told my company at that time, Light Iron. What I told them is I said, this 3D thing is going to be very lucrative. It's hard. And I love hard things. And I said, let's get into this. But I said, the phrase I said is, we're going to pitch a tent and not build a house. And I said, let's fully invest in this, except only in tent form. And I want to, when this is done, I want to pack it up and move on. I don't want to build. And other people built entire buildings. So that would be the equivalent of my house analogy. They built a home and they said, we're going to live in 3D. And I watched a few of them. Some of them did well for a time, but they hit a peak and then it declined pretty rapidly. So by my deployment of just doing 3D as a tent, we did it right. We did it well, but we did not move the company to make it our permanent standard of workflow. Yeah. And that way we were able to capitalize on it when it was value and provided value to our customers. And then when it didn't, there was no penalty. We didn't have to retroactively change anything. We simply took the tent stakes up and folded it up.
You know, Mike, let me jump in here real quick. You've worked at all of these different levels in the industry. And before we get into the big part of the industry, you used to really have your finger on the pulse of indie filmmaking. Indie filmmakers, not necessarily mainstream Hollywood, but the sort of like alternative Hollywoods that exist out there. And in the conversations that I'm having with people inside the indie space and web produced, there's a lot of conversations about how the model is broken, how people aren't making money, and how people who do actually get their project made and they get it onto a streaming service never see a dime, or they lose money on it, or they maybe get a small buyout initially and something might be, streamed 200 million times on Amazon and they never got a penny for it. Do you see the indie sort of space ever coming back to the era that we had in the past? Do you see it changing? Where do you see indie film going?
Great question. So the first thing you have to do is define what is an indie film. And I think what you're saying and what maybe people are thinking when they hear this is they're thinking about the indie films in a certain envelope that we call that's an indie film. And if you're thinking about an independent film that is a film that goes to Sundance and sells to a studio and gets a small theatrical with a great video delivery, and the filmmaker is able to make at least a small profit to generate the next film, I think that's going to become very, very unlikely, very small group of people that do it. But if you actually break down to like what is the definition of an independent filmmaker, then the envelope that we're used to consuming that 99-minute film in, that's going to go away. But the spirit and the ability for a creative with a small budget and a small group of friends to be able to create something, that's going to go up. So indie film isn't going away. It's just changing its mechanism, the type of content that's created, how it's created, what it does, who it's for, how it's distributed and consumed. That's what changes. So what we have to do is learn to change the definition of things to represent something new. And if we can't do that, we have to get a new name altogether, because if people can't separate them, then it doesn't work. But I believe independent filmmakers have an incredible opportunity in front of them, but it isn't going to be like Blair Witch Project. That's not, in fact, if Blair Witch Project came out today, it would do amazing on YouTube, right? It would do fine. The theatrical version of Blair Witch would do terrible today. So this is what we have to shift. Here's a data point for you. Goldman Sachs did a really thorough investigation on the content creator community, influencers, people like that. Here's something really interesting. What they found is by 2028, there will be 4 million individual content creators that make 6 to 7 figures a year building the content they make. Now think about that number. Think about, first of all, 6 to 7 figures is a lot of money, and 4 million people. All of Hollywood is maybe a few 100,000 people. We don't think of Hollywood in millions of people. Certainly in Hollywood, not everybody makes 6 to 7 figures a year either. So what's interesting is the power shift. When you're talking, Ilya, accurately about people that make films and don't really get any money in them, I think it's because of the chain of custody that it costs to take an independent film and get it to Amazon is so expensive through that system that each link in the chain takes a nickel, right? And so by the time it gets to the person, there's really not much left for the filmmakers. But if the filmmaker understands self-distribution, which is what Independent Film Channel, IFC, what they tried to get off the ground a dozen years ago, it never really materialized because the internet came in and swooped in there. We now have strong, reliable internet commerce, right? Like the internet isn't complicated. It's not like difficult to learn how to make money. Tons of entrepreneurs sell anything from necklaces and soap on the internet. They pay their taxes. They can sell internationally. It's very regimented. It's very reliable. It's good. You can see your data. Well, the same thing happens on YouTube. In fact, YouTube is an insanely powerful business because if you think about it, they're the largest content creator on earth that actually spends $0 creating their own content, right? And so they don't have any production budgets, unlike their competitors, and they are giving 50% of the revenue shared to the people who make the content. And I'm a recipient of that. It's true. It works. You get half of what is earned. It's the analytics are there. You can send it right to your bank account. It's pretty standard, easy stuff. If I were an independent filmmaker today trying to make movies, wouldn't I want 50% of the cut? That's a killer deal. No one's going to offer you that deal anywhere else. But you got to realize that having the big fanfare at the opening of the film, you're going to get rid of that. You're going to lose that. If that's really important to you, you're going to have a harder uphill battle as an independent filmmaker. But if you don't care about that and your objective is to tell a story that the most amount of people see so that you can tell another one, then I would absolutely say the heart of the independent film community is alive and well. It's shape-shifted, and the people who have learned how to do that are the ones that are capitalizing on it. And it's not that the ship has sailed and it's too late for you. The ship has sailed, but it's still swimmable. So you want to get out there and you want to learn how to do this and get on that train. You can absolutely make it happen. It's not going to be a 98-minute feature film, most likely. That's not what people want to consume in that space. But a good filmmaker should know that it's the art of creating and the desire and the passion of creating. If you change the form in which it's delivered, it doesn't take all that away. You're not robbed of that experience. And I think you can still generate money doing the craft that you want and discover how maybe someday it does become a feature if it's even required to. I don't even know, but that's how I would say it could happen.
Do you think we need a new vernacular, though? Because clearly what's being made for YouTube is not the same thing it previously been made for cinemas. Do we need to call it something else? Because is it the same disciplines? Is it the same stuff that you get from a theater or from, traditional movies that you'd see on a television or a streaming platform? It's not. What do we call it? What do we call? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. You're absolutely right. So if I'm talking to someone who wants to make a movie and you want to be able to get to that, my advice is not to start with making a movie. It is to start with understanding and learning the disciplines and building a team that actually makes alternative content that does work on YouTube. This is what we used to call independent filmmakers, because I don't want to speak for everybody, but most independent filmmakers were looking for a path to a studio deal. That would be most of them.
Certainly I don't think that's the case anymore, though. I think that's gone. I talked to a bunch of YouTubers out there. They are not interested in studio
YouTubers
deals.
I don't feel like YouTubers are YouTubers aren't paying attention to what's getting bought at Sundance. They're in their own ecosystem. To me, the question is, you can't say it isn't filmmaking. It is, or TikTok or whatever else people are using, and they're getting their word out, but it's a different form of narrative. It's a culture that I wasn't necessarily a part of, but I can't say it was unimportant. It was meant for younger people.
Ben, it's a long tail. It's a very long tail online. And Michael, I'm curious what your thought of this is, but what gets put onto YouTube seems so ephemeral. It seems like it's disposable.
That's my question.
It's like in the era of streaming or even a video store, something, would have some weight, would have some monument, the amount of time and hours and things that went to it. It feels like it goes to a giant YouTube graveyard. I mean, even if you make something great, there's a good chance no one will ever see it. So, I'm not expecting you to have all the answers, but I'm wondering if you have an opinion on
if anyone has all the answers.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone's got all the answers to this, but I'm curious if you've got an opinion as to, which direction this is going. And then I promise we'll talk about Strada, because I feel like part of what you're doing is directly appealing to these same people who might be looking to do something that use really, really high-end tools to make what it is that they want to do. And I'll let you get to that, but what do you think about the world that we're heading into, and how do you classify this?
Well, we have to separate what we think is a film and what it means to be a filmmaker with what the actual act of doing that is and how it's changed. We have to separate that. And there was a quote, I won't say the name because they're still alive, but there was a quote that was not that long ago that said, a big organization said, if you don't shoot film, you're not a filmmaker. Now, this is about 12 years ago. And that type of garbage is someone's bias that the actual, in that case, that subject, the actual medium is what makes you a filmmaker, which it's beyond ridiculous, because if you could shoot on shoestring and tell a story, what do you care? Right? If it's a good story, it doesn't matter. But some people really felt like that. So we have to do the same thing, Ilias. We have to make sure we have to understand, what is a filmmaker mean? And Ben, you made a great point, which was some people have no interest in getting a studio deal because they're content in the content that they're creating. And some of them are content with the way in which it's working and how much revenue they receive. And they do that. When they get burnt out or don't want to do it anymore, I think that's separate. So what I am trying to say is because my heart is in the long form storytelling, that's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. What Reed Hastings says at Netflix is he says, what we're actually doing as a business is we're competing for people's attention spans. That's what we're doing. That's what everybody that makes material is doing. You're just trying to compete with someone's attention spans. And what we do as individuals is we elect to consume content based on the attention span that we have at the time. So you're not going to start watching Oppenheimer in the grocery store line waiting for your turn, because you already know I'm going to waste some time right now, but I'm going to already categorize which tool I'm going to go to, which thing I'm going to click on based on how much time I need to waste right now, right? But that doesn't mean that making Oppenheimer or making something that is 1 minute long is not better than the other. Right? Because I agree. It's a different consumption of time, where previous to the internet, our only way to consume content was it was all appointment viewing. That was it. It was either appointment viewing in the home and there were a few channels, or it was appointment viewing in a theater and there was a few shows. That was it. It was all very appointment. Now it's not. And so the amount of content goes up, which means the amount of categories to create for goes up. And that's why I think it's cool that if I have to fix something, YouTube has the answer. And that stuff isn't designed for those creators to make a lot of money. I think they're just plumbers that are just helpful. That's great. That's good for society. That's good for them. Yeah. So you're not judging them on sound quality or framing. You don't even notice that stuff when you're watching a plumbing video. You don't even think about it. But when you're consuming that and it's time to sit down with a bowl of popcorn with a significant other and enjoy something, that's not what you're going to decide to watch, right? And what happens in your brain is your brain is calibrating to a new way to give its attention span, to compete with its attention. And that becomes where the theatrical works. So narrative storytelling will not go away. It will not go away, but it is in massive competition for non-narrative storytelling. And when we go for appointment viewing experiences, our expectation of quality goes up. All of a sudden if you took a plumber's training video and shot a movie with that technology, it would not do very well. Why is that? Think about the irony of that. If my mind is calibrated to learn something, I'm forgiving of lighting and quality and sound and framing and focus and things that people argue about, aspect ratios and frames per second and depth of field. Yeah. All that stuff is not even on the table to be discussed. But as soon as I'm going to suspend disbelief for any length of time, my brain recalibrates. Your brain, even people who don't know what we're talking about, they recalibrate their brain and they understand the difference there. That's good for the professional filmmaker, storyteller. But what's bad is that the amount of time people dedicate to those moments has declined. Therefore, the amount of content that needs to be created to fill those appointment viewings is smaller. There's more slices of the pizza, but the pizza is smaller, which is really tricky to sort of change. And it happens so quickly. That's why you have, in 2019, there were, I'm not sure if these numbers are perfect, they're close, but there were 450 series ordered in 2019. And this year, 2024, there were 250. Those numbers are not exact, but they're close. That's an indication of the dramatic shift in how many productions are being ordered, because in a way, we over-ordered in 2019. In fact, there's a stat that Netflix published that said in a given year, a Netflix customer is capable of spending 70 hours searching for Netflix shows to watch per year. Now, that is a anecdotal indicator of a surplus of material, because if you have that much to search through, it might mean there's too much, right? So if you're a studio and you think about it from a pure dollars and cents perspective, you only want to make as much content as you need for people to subscribe to the site, right? You don't want to make more than you need. It's just wasted money. And they're in the process of calibrating that. And I think our industry is recalibrating to how much content do we actually need to create given how much competition there is in it. I don't have those answers, but the trends that are coming out are certainly a decay compared to where we were pre-pandemic.
Well, let's go ahead and I would love to talk a little bit about Frame.io, but honestly, we're here to talk about Strada. And we've talked about Strada a lot on our podcast. By the way, I think that the irony is not, I want everyone to know the irony is not lost on me that we're talking about throwing content into a giant vacuum of content that's all content in every direction. And here we are making a podcast about it. But podcasts are where my attention went in the attention economy, in like 2006. But with Strada, every time you release a new video, I'm like, oh boy, I can't wait to sit down and pop my popcorn and watch what you're about to drop on us. Because not only is Strada a really intriguing product that I'm expecting once you guys release it into more public beta or have it available to be used, not only do I expect to be using it on my own productions, I expect it to be kind of a standard that a lot of people are using, like Frame.io, which you were also involved with. But also the videos that you're releasing, I keep encouraging people to check them out, are just showing some just mind-blowing techniques, like how to film something that looks not as exactly as good as the highest end Red camera, but good enough, definitely great on an iPhone and on a budget, and how you kitted up the iPhone and how much everything cost and what you used to do it. And I feel like what you're creating there, anyway, for me, is more than just a channel of like, hey, here's this new company I have, Strada, hire me, give me money, and more like also a public service to the indie filmmakers you're talking about like, here's how you can leverage workflow in your favor and do things that were physically impossible 5 years ago and do amazing stuff. So let's get into Strada and what was the impetus for it.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is if I look back on my career, I started at PBS, then I started the Plaster City Digital Post, which was pushing independent film solutions using digital technologies. At the time was videotape and hard drives. And then when that ran its course, it was about 4K and file-based, which was light iron. And then I moved to mobile and iPad technology and then HDR technology there. And then I realized it would be camera technology and workflow high-res cameras. So I moved to Panavision and started building 8K sensors with Red and Panavision and 8K large format. What's funny is if you think now, 9 years ago, 8K large format. We were there 9 years ago getting laughed at. People wanting to, if they had
I was laughing at it. I saw ultra high vision at NAB and I'm like, who needs this?
And if you had a tomato, they might have thrown it. But that's where the people who see fads and trends and standards, we don't get discouraged by that, right? We see through that. We're like, just hold on. So saw this 8K. Now shooting 8K large format is like everybody's thing. There's a billion lenses that do that now. These full frame and large format and 46 millimeter coverage sensor lenses. But in 2015, 2016, it not only was that infrastructure lacking, it was laughable. But that's what's required to build infrastructure to make it sustainable and open the doors of availability. So then after that, I started seeing cloud as the future. And so in 2019, I went to the startup Frame.io, became an executive there, was working with that great team and helped build cloud technologies for production. And then in 2022, I really saw this movement of AI. And so if you actually do the basic math of what I just described, about every 4 to 5 years, I see the next trend moving towards standard. I've always paid attention to it as a fad, but I'm seeing it move that transition from trendy to standard. And that's when I make my moves. And what's ironic is I've started several businesses over my life. I've been a part of many startups, and I'm often the guy who leaves first. I always think I'm the captain gonna go down with the ship. Like at Light Iron, back at my Plaster City days, Michael's gonna be going down with the ship. I left first. And then at Light Iron, after the acquisition of Panavision, I was the first to leave. And then at Panavision, I moved to Frame.io. At Frame.io, of the executives, I was one of the first to leave when we got acquired by Adobe. And so what that's not like a goal, or I don't even know if it's advice to people. All I'm saying is it's my story. I see these things and I'm so consumed, obsessive compulsive, I can't sleep, my back hurts, consumed with I must satisfy this thirst. And the only way to do it is to leave. That becomes this thing. And so as I move on to that next thing, I basically end up starting something new. And so last year at NAB, this is NAB 2023, I'm standing there representing this great team, this great product, a great company, Adobe, Frame.io, all this great cool stuff we're doing. And I'm looking around and I'm actually seeing zombies. What zombies are zombies are dead, but they don't know it yet, right? And so I'm looking around this sea of companies, and I started doing like basic calculus in my head, being like, wait a minute, AI could replace that company. AI, we don't need that company in a few years. Oh, that company, wait, we could fix that. And all these companies that make bespoke solutions, many of them 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, I'm starting to see how AI can start to chip away at them. And again, we talked earlier, if you lose 5-10% of your business, that could be it for a lot of people because they're only running 10% profit margins. So you lose to 10% of your business, you're in big trouble. So I realized sort of on the drive home from Vegas last April that I was starting to get that itch. I was starting to feel that dry mouth. I'm like, I need to drink of this new thing. And I don't know what it is. I just am compelled to do it. And I spent a few weeks making a big decision, which was to leave Adobe to start what we called Strada. I didn't have the name of Strada. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know what we were going to build. I just knew that if I eliminated my job, I could spend the time with the freest of minds to research AI, and it would lead me to an area that needed innovation. So I became this person with a lot of experience in all of the production and post-production, optics, cameras, video, DI, color correction, dailies, color science, workflow, media management, hard drive, sand construction, all that knowledge I had. And I was like, this has to be applicable in an AI future. How would I solve that problem? What would that look like? And I started drawing some ideas, and my brother quit his job at Netflix. He was a co-founder of Light Iron with me back in 2009, and he went on to Netflix when I went on to Frame.io. And we just started like sketching like, well, how would we do this in the cloud if we could? And when we discovered that, we saw the gap between where we are and where we think the cloud can be, and that's a list of problems that need to be solved. And if some people say, what is an entrepreneur? It's someone who identifies a problem worth solving. That's kind of what an entrepreneur is. There's some permutations on it, but that's effectively what it means for me. And I love solving problems. And a lot of people can see the gold pot at the end where they're like, okay, that's the objective. But what they're unwilling to do is spend all the time getting there. It's sort of like you think of Lord of the Rings. They can see Mordor, the whole movie, the whole saga. You can see it in the distance. It's all about what is the problem over that next ridge or that next valley, right? Yeah. That's where the entrepreneurial spirit needs to be. And here's the problem. What I started seeing is that the companies that were innovating AI solutions for media and entertainment professionals aren't media and entertainment professionals. And that started to bother me. And I started to see the companies that were building tools for Hollywood aren't in Hollywood. That's a problem because this is such a bespoke, nuanced way of storytelling process. It's even, I would say it's almost like illogical to a lot of people. Why is audio recorded by a separate department? That's a long story. But it's like all of these weird nuances to this. This is the type of stuff that people who are not subject matter experts will not get right on the second, third, fourth, fifth try. And then Hollywood is going to be force-fed these new technologies and new ways of doing things, and they're going to come to us from people who don't speak our language fluently. And so I wanted to build an AI solution that helps people make their content, but I'm going to do it from the 90028 zip code. And that's a familiar location. And that's the place that I love to be. It's where I've been, and it's like who I want to serve. And I believe that the world has widened enough that if we can serve this community with this technology, it will serve all communities because AI is the greatest equalizer of all time. And so that's the opportunity. That's what became, you can see it's an obsession. You can see my back hurts and I can't sleep and I eat Cheetos for dinner. Like that's the type of place my mind's at again. It's when I do my best work is when I'm in the scariest phases. So we're in the first 10 months of starting this thing by myself and then my brother. And now we're up to 13 people, hiring about 3 more in the next few months. And this thing is starting to grow a little bit. But these are the best parts of where it's totally terrifying, uncertain, unknown. Will people need this? Will they like it? Are we wrong in our projections and our expectations? I don't know yet, but I'm willing to fail in order to give it a shot.
Well, and I also like to our listeners who haven't been plugged into your YouTube channel like I have, when we bring up AI, a lot of people are going to think about things like voice synthesis and Chat GPT and Midjourney and, you know, whatever else, things that are basically taking away from creative professionals, they think. And to a degree, I think it is true. And I know that you've talked about this extensively on your YouTube channel, but explain sort of the difference between the AI you're leveraging versus that kind of AI. I know that, you know, AI is AI, it's machine learning, but Strada is not a creative tool in that it's not generating I want to make a picture of my family as if Picasso had painted them into Guernica. Your AI is a completely different thing. Can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, what we see today is AI in the headlines. Everything in the headlines is about the generative forms of AI. Now, that's going to be debated for a long time. There's a lot of issues about that. But what I believe is actually the more lucrative form of AI is actually not in generative forms at all. The most lucrative, and I also think the most useful forms of AI is in utilitarian tasks. And if you take us away from Hollywood for a second, let's not talk about storytellers. The jobs that are going to get affected by AI the most are actually going to be the backroom jobs that are tasks that are repeatable all the time. Right? Now, you could even go back 30, 40 years. That's what the first forms of robotics did too, right? It was the jobs that were just done over and over and over, stamping things out, printing something, right? The robotics was the first way to automate something that requires very little skill and it's repeatable over and over hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of times. That's the first major form of AI that's going to be super helpful. Because what I find when we think about the creative process, there are many parts of the creative process that are not desirable. Here's how I could describe what making a movie or a TV show is like. When you have this desire to paint a room in your house, we've all had that, like you have the vision, you have the desire, you know the color, you can start to see it in your mind. Then you have to tape the edges and then you talk yourself out of it because nobody wants to tape the edges. They just want to get to the painting part. And then you have to get the drop cloth out. Oh, I won't drip anything on the carpet. I'm not even gonna get the drop cloth out, right? That's the boring part of painting. And the creative process is no different. If creative people can get rid of the boring, mundane, repeatable, low skill stuff, then it means we have more time to do the satisfying, creative, discovery, fun stuff. And that's where AI is going to move first. And so what Strada is, it's an AI-based technology company that builds solutions that automate the laborious tasks and speed up the slow tasks so that you can get to the creative parts quicker. That's ultimately what we're all about, is giving more creative control to people by creating more time for them to have that creative moment instead of waste time taping. If there was a technology that could tape a room, everyone would paint their house. Everybody.
Oh, man.
Right?
Every day. I'd repaint it every day.
That's right. But the problem is the laborious, boring stuff that requires no skill and it's just slow and tedious and it's not, you're not getting any results, right? That's the stuff that bogs people down. It's also where a lot of creative people give up early. Right? Because they can't get past that early stuff. If AI can automatically do a lot of this, then we can get to the good stuff, problem solving, creative story content creation, and solving problems within the story instead of having to prepare solutions before we can even start.
So real quick, list those tasks, the ones that you've so far identified. And I know that the idea for the platform of Strada is that you'll probably be adding new stuff as AI can do it. But what are the kind of the core tasks that Strada does?
Well, today, the first task is being able to transfer assets from anywhere to anywhere. So cloud to cloud, from one cloud to another without having to download it first and re-upload it. That's a really laborious thing that no one wants to do, is wait for transfers. Second is transcribing. We typically don't transcribe narrative content at all, typically don't. But if we do it in the post-production space later. And by transcribing early up front automatically, then you can search by any word, any language, instead of having to remember scene 12, if you know there's a frog in scene 12, you just type frog, it brings up every shot with a frog, right? And then we also do what we call tag analyze. So it'll analyze the images with AI, and it will find locations, behaviors, people, objects, even emotions. So you could search by, Jack and Jill at night in the diner when Jill is crying, and it'll just find that material. And you don't have to be in an Avid to find that. You could be on your phone because Strada's in the cloud.
You don't have to know the scene and shot number.
No.
You don't have to know anything.
No. And if you don't know that it's Jack and Jill and you just know diner, then you're halfway there, right? Like you don't,
Yeah.
And that's the idea of concatenating together search functionality, so that you could search by a word. I'd say I can't remember what scene it's in. I just know Jack says, "My grandfather died." Well, you can type in grandfather and it'll do that, right? Or there's that scene with the dog. In Strada, if there's a scene with a dog, it'll find you every shot that has a dog in it, every time someone says the word dog, or every time it hears a dog barking. And that starts to speed up this hunt and pecking situation that all filmmakers do, not just editors. Editors are the kings and queens of hunting and pecking. But directors, producers, story writers, VFX supervisors, we're always looking for stuff. And if there's a way to expedite that laborious stuff, we can get to the answers faster. And because we are cloud to cloud, you can move assets where you need them to go at the speed of the cloud, which is backplane speed. In other words, if you're in Dropbox and you need to move something to Frame.io, today you have to download that asset and then re-upload it to another cloud. In Strada, you can move it at 10 gigabytes per second. So you can just move, you can move 500 gigs in a couple of minutes from one cloud to the other. So you don't even notice that these huge transfers are even happening. So you can activate other people on your team to get to the good stuff faster.
And does this like, depending on what you're editing in, Avid or Premiere, Final Cut Pro, whatever, does this stuff all port into that, or is that something that is coming in the future?
Yeah, so the way to get it into your editor is to just simply output an ALE or an XML, and then all that metadata is already found. We're syncing everything for you in the cloud. We're doing multicams in the cloud. We can build bins and then transcripts and analytics in the form of XML so that you can just put it into your NLE. It's already synced, it's already rendered, it's already transcribed, it's already analyzed, it's already tagged, and you can just get going. Now,
so you have all those tags and everything, so I can go into Avid and search for dog, and it'll do the same thing.
Yeah, because it's already been done.
Holy crap, that is a game changer.
It's already been done.
How often have all of us been in an edit-based situation where hey, there was that one shot where the bicycle goes by in the background, and there was something I liked about it. Can we pull that up? And then it's okay, well, it's documentary or reality. We have literally hours of footage to scrub through before we can happenstance, halfway stumble across that kind of a thing.
I just did a shoot last week where we did a lot of drone footage, and we were in the woods, and there's a lot of footage on the ground in the woods, and then there's drone footage. And what the tag analyze in Strada did is it understands drone footage and aerials. And so I can instantly separate aerial woods shots from the ground wood shots, so I can separate drone without having to manually put it in its own bin.
Oh my God.
It knows. And just that, if that's 25% less hunting and pecking for stuff, then all of a sudden it is really, really, really powerful,
Man, that's game changing. Strada currently is in a private beta, right? Have you decided when you're going to go to public beta?
Yeah, so our goal is to continue releasing the private beta throughout NAB throughout the whole summer, and
anyone can apply to be in the private beta.
Anyone can play in the beta. Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're interested in using Strada on their next project, they could reach out to Strada and try and get into the private beta.
That's right. The website's strada.tech. And this is where we're letting people in to test it out. Mainly that tagging, analyzing, transcription, auto syncing, binning, naming, multicamming. Boring stuff. But if you're a filmmaker, everything I just said, you're like, yeah, I have to do all those things. I wish I didn't, right? So it's that's the point. Then you can get to the cutting quick. So that's going to be all summer long, summer 2024. And then as we get into the fall, we'll start to go into public beta and then start releasing the product. And so it's all going to happen in 2024 if all things go according to plan. But we're super excited about getting it in the hands of a wide amount of people to be able to help them tell their stories.
It's super exciting. It's super exciting. I've really been enjoying watching, all this progress ever since you and I chatted about it before you ever, put anything on YouTube or, told the world about it. I really hope that 2024 is the best year yet, man. I'm really excited about what this means. And I don't think that it really is going to, I don't think people are going to understand how much time and how many tools that you're really talking about and how much it can really save them, because it's very specific stuff right now, but there's so many repetitive tasks. There's so many things in filmmaking that are just like, it's a great analogy with painting and then having to do the prep work for painting. But at the same time, a lot of the job is just prep work. It's nothing but prep work. There is never any painting. It is like there are people whose entire existence is that work. And to be able to streamline that and to have one person be able to do potentially the work of 10 people because, they have extra tools at the ready, that's monumental shift type of stuff that could be happening.
I appreciate that. I'm glad I'm glad there's one customer out there. Thank you, Ilya. I appreciate that.
Well, I think you got two right here because I think Ben. I saw Ben's eyes light up when you were, showing the example of logging. So, but no, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see. And Michael, hey, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always fun to chat, and I really can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, you guys keep doing it because you tell great stories about storytellers, and it sounds sort of meta, but you're creating content for content creators, and there is an absolute need for that. That's how we learn and consume, and we can have great open conversations about what's next. So I applaud you for continuing this for so many years.
Oh, awesome. No, it's our pleasure. We love doing it.
Thanks, Michael. I'll see you at NAB.
You got it.
So that was Michael Cioni. Michael, thanks again for being on the show. It was so great to have you and to finally...
Blew my mind, as always. Just mind blown every time I talk to Michael. The thing is, when you talk to Michael, it seems like, how could someone spontaneously have all that information at their fingertips and just deliver to you in such a Tony Robbins-esque fashion? Just so much passion, so much enthusiasm. He just fills me with happiness. Like I feel like I can take on the world. He's so goddamn smart.
He lives it. He lives it every day. That's how he does it.
He's the best.
And now, short ends.
So, Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about our obsessions of the week. What do you got going on? What are you obsessed about? What's cool in your world?
So I think I got a cool one this week. I stumbled across something on Max called The Power of Film. Have you seen this documentary?
No, I haven't seen it. How is it?
So it's called The Power of Film, and it's a 4-part, I believe, series that was made for TCM. And I'd never heard of it. And it's it's basically a one long interview with a guy named Howard Suber. And I guess he's a huge professor at UCLA, School of Cinema Television. And it's basically just like having the smartest film scholar on earth just drop wisdom on you about what makes movies work. And he's cutting to old movies. He's cutting to new movies. He's referencing stuff all over the place. And it's a philosophical show, I would say. He's talking about things like the power of paradox is one of the episodes, heroes and villains, the basic building blocks of movies. And he's talking about something, I mean, this is kind of what hooked me, is I always wonder what makes a movie stick around. I've probably mentioned on here before, but it's been a while. My friend, 2 friends of mine only got halfway through this podcast idea, but it was cool. It was called 80s All Over. Every episode was a month of the 1980s. So like episode 1 was January 1980. They only got up to like 1985 and they stopped. But they did this deepest dive, and it was the most interesting thing to listen to because, I was a little kid at that time, but I remember some of those movies. And as they got closer to the mid 80s, I remember them more, Ghostbusters and Gremlins and stuff like that. But like how many dozens of movies come out per month, some by huge filmmakers, some starring huge stars that just get lost to time. And what Howard Suber is talking about is like what makes them stick in our culture? What makes something become Get Out or Silence of the Lambs or Some Like It Hot or Star Wars? You know, like the movies that persist, and kind of what is it about the dynamics, the story dynamics, the storytelling, the characters, blah, 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 that makes those things really cohere in our culture. And I was just kind of glued to every episode. I don't usually sit down and binge stuff, especially after my son goes to sleep. I'm usually dead asleep within a half an hour. And I kind of just like in like 3 or 4 nights watched all the episodes. I think there's only 5 episodes.
It sounds awesome. It totally sounds like it's up my alley too. I'm into checking that out.
And I think anyone who listens to this show, obviously, you know, like you care about cinematography, and he talks about how that works too. You know, like he's mostly talking about story and character, but you know, he is talking about it in terms of film, and it's impossible to talk about that in terms of film without talking about how you make it.
Yeah, it sounds super cool. I'm in. Yeah, you convinced me.
Cool.
Yeah,
it's on Max, streaming on Max right now. So Ilya, what is your pet obsession of the week?
I stumbled across something a while ago, and it kept coming up every now and again. As you know, I'm a little bit of a Japanophile. You know, I speak a little Japanese. I know a little bit about Japanese culture. It's been going on for like,
You like 15, the noodles. You like the ramen.
That's true. I do eat some ramen. That's really true. I stumbled across an artist not that long ago named Monokubo. Monokubo. She actually sadly passed on a couple of years ago, but she was an illustrator who specialized in sort of magical realism and would create these worlds in these illustrations of giant animals that were existing sort of like in everyday mundane life. And these giant animals were like, I'm
looking at it right now. Oh my God, this is amazing.
It's really, really cool stuff. And I would say definitely look at it. Like there's an Instagram account that has some of it, but she published 5 books. She published 5 books about this. And it's really, really interesting. And every once in a while when it sort of comes up in a Facebook feed or it comes up in my Instagram or some sort of reference comes up, it's always like a little bit of like moment of joy, because it's just, there's something about it that's so unexpected. And so I think you just kind of have to see it. And we'll put a link in the show notes, of course, over at Cam Noir. But if you take a look at it, it's like, giant pandas and stuff being inserted into like everyday life, or seals or foxes or whatever. Yeah. And people sort of like,
people like leaning on them or laying on them or standing up next to them.
Exactly. Sort of like friendly giants that are kind of, just appearing out of nowhere.
Kind of reminds me of like Miyazaki, like My Neighbor Totoro.
It really does. It feels like something out of like a Miyazaki, or it feels like something out of a Studio Ghibli that like never was. It never was created, never was that, but it just definitely feels like it's all sort of part of that world. And I don't know, there's something about it that's just joyful, that like, it's rather uplifting. And whenever my feed something comes across like this, it's always like sort of like a wonderful and bittersweet thing, because Monokubo is not going to make any more of these. She was a very singular voice. She received some acclaim and got to publish these books, but no, is also no longer with us. So we won't get anything more from her. But this is a really wonderful testament of what's left behind, and we all get to enjoy this work, which is great. So if you do go to the Instagram, which I think is probably how most people find her work, make sure that you actually click on the item, on the individual images, and don't just look at the thumbnail view, because then you really get much more of a sense of what it is. And I'd even recommend looking at it on a bigger screen, not just your phone, so you really understand the scale.
Wait, we have screens besides our phones?
I know.
I don't know what sci-fi world you're living in, man.
1 or 2 people, have screens bigger than a phone, and I recommend it. So anyway, that's my short end for this week. So Ben,
excellent. That's really cool. I'm looking at her work right now.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like a little bit of magical realism? Guy kind of getting like pulled into their everyday, which is fun. So Ben, let's thank some people. Who do we have to thank for this show coming together?
Oh my God. Well, first off, definitely Alana Cody, who is kicking so much ass and getting us all these amazing interviews. Cioni was one that was, Michael obviously was happy to come on the show, but scheduling and stuff.
We got to coordinate that. Yeah. That's not easy.
Yeah. And but she's getting us, man, we have so many cool ones coming up. I don't want to talk about them until we've already done them.
We've also got some cool ones that are in the can, which are just finally now coming out, which I'm very excited about too. So there's
the whole Oscar season kind of throws off our game, because we're always in a race to get all the Oscar stuff together.
That's true.
So Alana Cody, we should definitely thank Ben Katz, and we did not make Ben's life easy at all this week, so apologies, Ben.
God,
thank you for.
It seemed like it should have been such a no-brainer, but no, this one really did become a thing.
I think. Well, you're about to travel, and I have a bunch of work stuff I have to do, and I think that we're just not on our game sometimes. Hey, it happens, and when it happens, Ben Katz is nice enough to clean up our mess, so. Which hopefully nobody is even aware of as they're hearing this, because he already cleaned it up, and you watched or listened to it, and there you go. And then last but never least, we should thank Kays Alatrachi, who composed all of our music. Go check out his website, musicbykays.com. Hire him to compose your next score, or hire him to do CGI on your next project, or hire him to color grade your next project, or you could just skip all of that and hire him to direct the whole thing, because he's good at all those things. He's great at all those things.
That's excellent. Ben, where can people find you if they want to track you down?
Please go to benrock.com. More people have been finding me on LinkedIn lately. Like I can usually tell if it's a listener because they'll friend request me on LinkedIn or connect me on whatever the fuck they call it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's linking,
and I'll be like, oh, it's a cameraman from Australia or something. I'll be like, oh, cool. Always happy to interact with anyone. But yeah, go to benrock.com. You can find all my social media stuff there. Feel free to say hi. How about yourself, Ilya? People can find you. I mean, you already told them where you can find you. They can find you Sunday, in Las Vegas.
This Sunday, April 14th at the Fireside Lounge. You can find me in person if you want to come by and have a drink, have a bite, hang out, chit chat. It'll be beautiful Las Vegas, so it'll be right there on the strip. And otherwise, find me on LinkedIn or over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. And I think that's just about going to do it for this week, Ben. You want to take us out?
I was going to try and make you do it, but let's say thanks for tuning in. Isn't that what we landed on? I don't remember.
Until next time.
Until, one time that'll be a lie because one of us will drop dead. One day. It's like a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, as long as we keep doing it, we'll have to,
That's true. That's true. All right. Also, it is possible that one of us will just stop doing the podcast or not be available or
That's it. I quit. It's over.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we can quit.
Yeah, just...
Anyway, until then, everybody.
Bye. Okay.
Bye.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.